you're watching Rush Hour with me, Sumita Kareed. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll be touching upon the top stories of the day. But let's first begin with our top story. In fact, this is going to be a key story that we will be tracking right here on ET Now. And this is on the Russia-Ukraine war. Well, the end of the Russia-Ukraine war may be on the horizon. European leaders met for an emergency summit in Paris to deliberate on peace negotiations. Additionally, the United States and Russia will meet in Riyadh to discuss the issue. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has highlighted the urgent need for an armed forces of Europe. He argued that the ongoing conflict with Russia has proven Europe's military independence is not just a concept, but a critical necessity. Zelensky also stressed that no peace talks regarding the war should take place without Ukraine's involvement. He also expressed concerns over the United States and Russia meeting to discuss peace without Kiev at the table, also emphasizing the need for Europe to have a direct role in the negotiations. Let's listen into what the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, and then we'll move on to our guest, a live guest who will be joining us in just a short while.
Let's be honest, now we can't rule out the possibility that America might say no to Europe on issues that threaten it. Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
And to make sense of these developments that are happening with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war, or rather the end of the Russia-Ukraine war, I'm now joined by Kabir Taneja, the Deputy Director, Strategic Studies and Middle East Fellow, ORF. Thank you very much, Kabir, for joining us here on ET Now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Kabir, if Russia and United States are to hold talks tomorrow to end the war, what would the peace deal really look like? What is Trump's peace plan for Europe?
Look, Sumita, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to say, because it's quite unprecedented to have talks about a peace deal on the Ukraine conflict without Ukraine and without Europe. I think this negotiation is going to be more about what kind of role America would like to play going forward. And the ball is in the European court now on what kind of response will they give to the Americans more than the Russians right now, considering the unity of taking on Russia in Ukraine, which was there under the Biden administration, is broken now. So I think we have to first and foremost see what the European response is going to be on these talks that take place, interestingly, in Saudi Arabia. Because just a couple of hours back, Ukraine's President Zelensky landed in Abu Dhabi. So, there are multiple dynamics being played out here, even in the Middle East, on power plays between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But I think the ball is in the European court right now, and we'll have to wait and watch what their response is going to be on the initial talks between the US and Russia.
Absolutely. And we just heard President Volodymyr Zelensky actually stating that there can be no peace deal without actually excluding Europe, excluding Ukraine. And of course, we've seen the kind of statements that have come out of European leaders. In fact, Kiev's Starmer has also given a statement on this as well. So what could be the possible implications of excluding Europe? Is Trump's plan hinting at a possible end game for Ukraine?
Look, there's definitely a hint that I think the Americans have made clear, the Trump personality is all about cracking deals, or at least doing deals. And, the Abraham Accords happened under him, the Afghanistan exit happened under him. And now these are two core conflicts that are happening right now. One is Gaza and one is Ukraine, is something that he wants to end. But, as far as Ukraine is concerned, I really don't see how Trump is going to succeed without having the Europeans or the Ukrainians in the room. Now, this could be a ploy by Trump as well to play his cards, to pressurize the Europeans to relent and actually talk with the Russians, maybe between amongst themselves on a bilateral level, but at least begin that dialogue with Moscow, because Moscow has been in the doghouse as far as Europe is concerned. So I think this can be at least a segue from Trump and from the US to pressurize the Europeans to start some sort of dialogue with the Russians, even if an immediate peace deal is actually not on the horizon.
Right. So, what are you anticipating the response from European leaders?
Well, that's the golden question, as you just mentioned. The fact that the British Prime Minister has alluded that they may be open to placing some boots on the ground. That means troops on the ground in Ukraine is a very very big statement to make. We are also seeing France hosting a meeting. We are seeing sort of the multiple huddles happening in Europe right now. It's plausible that they do sort of come together, and if not open immediate channels with Russia, maybe they offer something to Trump itself, perhaps a broad stroke increase in defense spending with all European Union countries. That could be one option that the European Union offers to the Trump administration to pacify the Trump administration. But it seems that if the UK is alluding to the fact that they are open to placing some boots on the ground, maybe some other countries, especially the ones on the border with Russia, such as Poland, could actually join is this kind of movement. But I think let's wait and watch and see what kind of outcome the first meeting, which is slated to take place tomorrow in Riyadh, comes out with.
Right. Right, absolutely, Kabir. And there are fears of the war actually exacerbating, given the number of stakeholders that there, European leaders, and of course, there is Volodymyr Zelensky, and of course, Vladimir Putin as well. But what are the possible hindrances that you foresee as compared to what we've seen in the past? Because Russia has been adamant about keeping annexed territories with itself and keeping Ukraine out of NATO. On the other hand, you also have Ukraine saying that all the territory that's been seized by Ukraine in Russia should be kept as part of the peace deal and it should remain with Ukraine. However, you also have the United States stating that that's just an unrealistic objective. And I'm quoting what U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said.
Look, that's one of the golden questions, even from the U.S. point of view. From what kind of message does a potential thaw, yes, that you will stop the war, send, but also in what are the deliverables of such a thaw? If the Russians are allowed to keep the territories they have taken from Ukraine, what kind of message does that send to China? What kind of message does that send to American allies? For their security in the future. Tomorrow, the South Koreans could see this in a very negative light, over considering officially the Korean War has not ended since the 60s. So there are multiple sort of factors here on not just what is going to happen with this deal, but what is the role of American power and hegemony going forward. And I think that if some kind of compromise is made where the Russians, for example, are allowed to keep most of the territory that they have taken from the Ukrainians, it will be a tectonic shift for most American treaty allies, and they could recalibrate their security arrangements with the US as well, and place their national interests first. So you could see some countries even taking the nuclear option going forward, potentially as part of their own individualistic security arrangements.
Right, and that could have wide-ranging implications, Kabir. But one final question before we let you go. Why has Saudi Arabia been kept as a venue of choice for talks on the war?
That's a good question. I don't think Saudi Arabia has been kept as a venue. I think they offered themselves as a venue, and it's been interesting because a couple of months back, the Saudis were personally thanked by Putin for playing a role in what was the largest exchange of prisoners between the US and Russia since the Cold War. So clearly, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been involved. He has a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, and he's offered Saudi Arabia as a conduit via which the Trump administration can reach out to the Russian counterparts. And you have to remember that Mohammed bin Salman has already offered a multiple billion-dollar investment into the US. So he's already in the good books as far as the Trump administration is concerned. So, this is just Saudi basically asserting its own power and dominance as a middle power going forward, and not necessarily as one that completely allies with the US, but one that has open options with the US, Russia, and China alike.
Right. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Kabir, for sharing your insights and, of course, your perspectives on what will possibly pan out tomorrow as, of course, Russian and, of course, the United States meet on talks to end this Russia-Ukraine war. Thank you very much once again for joining us here on ET Now. And ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for us to slip into a quick break, but lots more coming up on the other side.